Welcome back, guys, to Fear Begins, a step towards the horror. In today's episode, I'm sharing 7 true and disturbing stories about being home alone in the Appalachian Mountains. After these stories, you'll understand the real meaning of being alone in the Appalachian wilderness. But before we begin, please consider subscribing and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now, let's start. My sister Ray had a weekend shift at the vet clinic in Shelbyville. She couldn't take me with her, so she dropped me off at the cabin just after noon. She said she'd be back Monday, probably late. It was our grandfather's old place, a half-forgotten cabin tucked into the side of a wooded hill in Knox Hollow. You wouldn't even know it was there unless you were already looking for it. The trees stretched on forever, growing thicker the farther you hiked, like the land wanted to swallow everything whole if you let it. There's no cell service out that far, not even a flicker of a signal if you wanted to make a call. You had to hike a quarter mile down the gravel path, cross a ditch with a broken pipe sticking out, and stand on this flat rock someone had spray painted blue back in the 90s. That rock was the sweet spot, anywhere else nothing. Granddad used to call it the phone booth. Before she drove off, Ree gave me this look through the window, one eyebrow raised, mouth tight, like she was silently repeating, "Don't burn the place down. Don't call me crying. Don't do anything dumb." I grinned and gave her a thumbs up. The universal teenager signal for "I hear you, but I'll be doing whatever I want." She rolled her eyes and left. Thing is, I wasn't nervous. I'd stayed there alone before. We all had. The cabin wasn't big, just a single-story rectangle with wood paneling, a beat-up shed leaning on one side, and an old propane tank rusting into the ground out back. Inside, it was clean but sparse. 2 twin beds, a wood stove that didn't work, one couch that had definitely seen better days, a shelf of field guides and dusty cookbooks. The quiet out there was different, not peaceful in the way people like to imagine, heavier. You could hear your own blood if you stood still long enough. I always thought that was kind of cool. That first day passed like they usually did. Slow but fine. I made toast, dug through a box of my granddad's paperbacks, messed with the generator. Before giving up, it sputtered twice, then gave this half-choke sound like a dying lawnmower. Not worth the effort. Mostly, I wandered the woods a little, read, and sat on the porch counting chipmunks. Nothing weird, not yet. It started that night, Saturday late. I went to bed around midnight. The moon was full enough to slip through the blinds, casting faint patterns on the floor. I lay there staring at it, letting the stillness seep in. But this silence wasn't like before. It was deeper, more intentional. I remember wishing for a breeze, just something to break it. At some point, I must have drifted off. The next thing I remember was a sound. Outside, not loud, just enough to tug me awake. Something soft, like a shuffle through dry leaves. I cracked one eye, rolled over, and thought, probably a deer. Then I sank back down. The next morning, I saw the boot prints. I almost missed them. The ground was uneven, a mix of leaves, dirt, and roots. But near the side of the cabin, where the earth stayed damp, the tracks stood out. Big ones, heavier than mine. Definitely not mine. They weren't brand new, but they weren't old either. Clear tread, not work boots, looked more like hiking boots. The prints curved around the cabin, passed under the bathroom window, looped toward the back, and just stopped. No return trail, no overlapping steps, just a one-way path that ended in the trees. I circled the cabin twice trying to find another set. Nothing. I told myself it was nothing. Rural land, people hunt, neighbors wander. Maybe someone cut across by mistake. But the image of those prints lodged in my brain like a splinter. That afternoon, the woods went still. It wasn't gradual. It was like a switch, 1 minute. Birds and wind and that low hum of life. The next, nothing, no rustling leaves. No insects, no chipmunks, just empty silence, heavy. I stood on the porch waiting for it to come back. It didn't. Then came the knock. Not at the door, One hard, solid knock against the back wall, the kitchen wall. There's no porch back there. No steps, just bramble mud and a sharp drop into the woods. I froze with my hand on the fridge. No second knock, no footsteps, just one clean hit, like someone wanted me to know they were there. Nothing more. Eventually, I locked every window. Even the tiny bathroom one nobody could fit through. Bolted both doors, pulled the shades shut. I wasn't panicking, not yet. I just didn't want to be surprised. I tried to distract myself, ate half a granola bar, read the same page 6 times. Without understanding a word, walked the same loop checking windows again and again. When it got dark, I dragged the couch to face the door, sat with the hatchet from the shed in my lap, left the lamp on. Eventually, the propane ran out. The light flickered, then died. I lit a candle, held it in my hand like I didn't trust it on the table. At some point, I dozed off. When I woke, it was pitch black, no fridge hum, no clock glow, just silence. I lit another candle, sat there talking out loud to myself, just to fill the space, asking what I'd want for breakfast, what time it might be, whether the stars were out. Then I saw it. The couch had moved, not by much, maybe 2 feet toward the center of the room. But I knew where I'd fallen asleep. I hadn't moved it. Faint drag lines marked the dust where the leg scraped sideways. No footprints, nothing else. Just the couch, nudged from behind. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with the hatchet on my knees, staring at the shadows. At first light, I decided I was done. I threw a few things in my bag, laced my boots, and stepped outside. No breakfast, just out. That's when I saw the note. Folded neat, tucked under the mat. The paper was stiff, grooves pressed deep into it. The handwriting blocky, almost angry. Batteries, soup, duct tape, bleach, yo-yo. I read it once, twice, a third time. Then dropped it like it was burning my hand. I didn't scream, I didn't panic. I just stepped back inside. Shut the door, locked it again. That whole day, I sat at the kitchen table with the hatchet on my lap, watching the door, watching the window, watching the note. Right before sunset, another knock. 2, this time slow, deliberate, from the front door. Then breathing, calm, steady, too close, too human. I didn't move, just waited. When it stopped, I finally looked again. The note was gone. Around midnight, another appeared. Same handwriting, same paper, placed in the middle of the table. We thought you'd come sooner. By then, I stopped trying to explain. The 4th note wasn't on paper. It was scrawled across the bathroom mirror, backward and faint, like someone had smeared grease across the glass. We can hear you thinking. I never checked the crawl space. It's under the cabin. 4 feet high with a hatch behind the shed. I knew where it was. I just couldn't open it. I think I was more afraid of finding nothing. That would have been worse. I waited out the night with the hatchet across my knees, staring at the shadows. As soon as it was light enough, I grabbed my bag and stepped outside. I didn't even close the door. I walked barefoot down to the rock. My phone buzzed back to life halfway there. I called Ree, no explanation, just come get me now. She didn't ask questions. She must have heard something in my voice. We haven't spoken about it since. I was 19 when it happened. My parents were heading out to a wedding in Westmore, Tennessee, some cousin I barely remembered. It was one of those long family weekends with back-to-back dinners, rehearsals and all-day receptions, hours of small talk with people you recognize but can't quite place. They didn't make me go, which I appreciated. I think they knew I'd be miserable. I told them I'd stay back and watch the house. Truth was, I just wanted the place to myself for a few days. We live deep in the Appalachian hills. Even locals called our road the end of the line. No joke. You had to drive 6 miles past the last bit of pavement, cross 2 narrow wooden bridges, then creep up a winding gravel incline with just enough traction to keep it interesting. At the top, the road opened into a small clearing. That's where our house sat. Just us and the trees. I loved it. Remote, quiet, no traffic, no random drop-ins. The woods wrapped around like a thick wall. and the nearest house, an old place downhill, had been empty for years. No one came out there unless they meant to. That's part of why what happened stuck with me so hard. Friday afternoon, I stood on the porch and waved as their car disappeared into the trees. Then I went back inside, kicked off my shoes, tossed a frozen pizza in the oven, and flopped onto the couch with a blanket and a soda. I had a queue of shows lined up and no plans at all. It was supposed to be one of those do-nothing weekends where you barely change clothes. And at first it was. I remember falling asleep. After 3 o'clock in the morning, the TV was still on, playing some late-night comedy rerun. I was curled up on the couch, half wrapped in fleece, that kind of half-sleep where your brain's aware, but you're not really conscious. I was in that in-between zone. Then came the sound, tap, 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 twick. Sharp like someone tapping fingernails twice against the living room window. I opened my eyes but didn't move. Just lay there staring at the flickering TV, trying to convince myself it was part of the show, or maybe a branch brushing the glass. But then about a minute later, just long enough for my heart to settle, tap tap, same rhythm, same spot. This time I sat up, reached for the remote, muted the TV. The silence was too complete. No wind, no frogs, no crickets, none of the usual hums of the house. Just the fridge in the kitchen and my own breath. I got up, padded to the window, and flipped on the porch light. Nothing. The front yard was still porch, driveway, tree line, empty. Nothing moved. I leaned closer, scanning as far as the light would reach. Beyond that, the woods were just black, too thick to see more than a few feet. But right up close, nothing. I checked the front door lock. Solid, same with the side windows. I turned off the light, walked back through the living room, and headed to my bedroom. No way I was sleeping on the couch again. I grabbed a flashlight, locked the bedroom door, and curled up under the covers. Eventually, I dozed off. The next day was quiet, but I felt different, edgy. I stayed up reading instead of watching TV, left every light in the house on, even the ones I usually ignored. Around midnight, I made some tea just to have something warm in my hands. Then I heard it again, not from the window, from below. Thud, 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 thud. Muffled but real, like something bumping the floorboards from underneath. I froze in the kitchen, mug halfway to my mouth. Thud, 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 thud. Same rhythm, same weight, not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. Our house didn't have a basement. Just a crawl space 3 feet high, barely enough to move. The only way in was through a hatch behind the porch steps. We never opened it, only if something broke under there, or if something died and forced us to. I grabbed the flashlight, went to the back door, and stepped outside. A cool breeze hit me. I wanted to turn back, but I pushed myself toward the hatch. The padlock was still hanging on the latch, but the bolt, the part that actually secured it, gone. Not on the ground, not broken, just gone, as if someone had carefully removed it, then left the lock dangling like an ornament. The dirt around the hatch looked off too, not trampled, no clear prints, but faint, uneven, the way ground looks when someone walks carefully, trying not to leave evidence. I backed away, went inside, locked the door, dragged a chair under the handle, and sat with my back to the fridge. Didn't move until daylight. Sunday morning, I tried to act normal, made breakfast, put on music, but my nerves were raw. I kept checking my phone, tried calling my parents, no signal. I thought about driving into town, even put on shoes. But then I froze in the kitchen. How was I supposed to explain leaving? Something tapped on my window, and the dirt looks weird. No one would buy it. Not even Belle, so I stayed. That night I checked every lock, every shade. I took the biggest knife from the kitchen, carried it to my room, and pushed the dresser in front of the door. Just after 2 a.m., the TV shut off. Not the power. It was still plugged in. The screen just went black. I hadn't even been watching it, but the second it cut out, the air shifted. Then every light flickered once. Not a full outage, more like a pulse, like something had passed through the wiring. Then tap tap living room window, tap tap kitchen, tap tap bathroom, tap laundry room, all at once, same rhythm, same tempo. Every window in the house like they were taking turns. Like they were sending a message. I didn't scream, didn't say a word. Just moved slowly, closed my bedroom door, locked it, and shoved the dresser tighter. Then tap on the bedroom window. I couldn't look. I sat on the floor with the knife in both hands, back against the wall, breath shallow, hands numb. Then came 4 knocks. Slow, heavy, not taps, knocks. They weren't searching anymore. They knew exactly where I was. I must have blacked out from exhaustion, from fear, maybe both. Because the next thing I remember, light was coming through the blinds. The room was quiet again. I stayed there until noon. When I finally stepped out, the windows were still shut, no cracks, no breaks, but each one had faint smudges, bright at face height, like someone had leaned in close. The crawl space hatch was still locked, but the metal latch had been twisted, not snapped, just warped, like someone had gripped it with both hands and pulled until it bent. That was it. I packed a bag, left a note, and drove an hour to Bell's. I was staying by myself at this old cabin my uncle owns out in the Appalachians. He always used it for hunting trips, and I'd tagged along before, but only with family, my dad or cousins around. This time though, I wanted to shake things up. A full week totally offline, no cell service, no neighbors to rely on, just me, a basic cabin in the woods, and a chance to figure out if being alone was actually possible. Even arriving felt like stepping into another world. The road up to the place winds through dense ridges where sunlight filters down in thick, lazy beams. I parked my truck near the front porch, and the moment I stepped out, the air felt different, heavy, quiet, like the woods were holding their breath. That first afternoon, I dragged groceries inside. Nothing fancy, just canned food. Bread, coffee, and a pack of microwavable mac and cheese. Ground beef and chili cans got the most use. But I also packed instant soup, because lazy dinners are my specialty. I stacked firewood in a neat pile beside the stove and set my duffel bag on the floor. I even unpacked a little, coffee mugs on the counter, a book near the window, though I don't think I opened it the whole week. The cabin creaked here and there, floorboard shifting, the old wood settling. A tiny clock ticked near the door. The silence was sharper than I expected. No cars, no birds fussing, no buzz of electricity. I remember thinking how unreal it all felt. It was peaceful, kind of blissful for a moment. That evening, I made coffee the old-fashioned way, boiling water on the stove, scooping grounds into the pot, letting it steep. I sat by the window, sipping and watching shadows grow long across the porch. Quiet wrapped around me like a soft blanket. I kept telling myself I was exactly where I wanted to be. No distractions, just simplicity. I'd always worried about being alone, but it turned out I was okay with it. That night I dozed off easily, thinking the only sound I'd hear was my own breathing. But the second night altered that comfort in ways I never expected. I was in the kitchen, hunched over a steaming pot of chili, stirring with a spoon, trying to ignore the pile of dishes when I heard it. A slow, heavy step on the porch. Only one. That sound. The porch has this one particular plank that groans, loud when you step on it. A groan I knew from all the visits as a kid. No one could sneak across without giving it away. I froze mid-stir, then another step. Moving, shifting, deliberate, and then nothing. I set the spoon on the counter, a scoop of cheese-spotted chili still clinging to it. I edged over to the window. Moonlight slanted in. I could see the outline of the rocking chair, the cooler, the stacked firewood empty. Nothing alive out there. I blinked. Told myself it was a raccoon. Or maybe the wind made the porch flex. But the chili cold now for sure. I went back to the table. But a minute later came another creak. This one longer, deeper, like someone shifting weight slowly. I didn't think. I just stood up, jiggled the doorknob, and yanked the door open fast. Still nothing, just silence. I laughed at myself. A nervous laugh. Low and shaky. Then the deadbolt caught my eye. It was halfway turned, not locked, not open. Just stopped in between, and I hadn't left it like that. I'm obsessive about locks. I check doors until I'm sure. That one detail dropped a weight into my gut. My breath went shallow, heartbeat fast. I slammed the door closed, turned the deadbolt hard this time, and wedged a chair under the knob. Mind raced through every explanation possible, old wood settling, imagination. But rationalizing didn't matter. I couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying the sound. That step, the pause, the gap, and eventually sleep just didn't happen. Around midnight, I dragged myself to the bedroom, threw a blanket over me, flashlight. Within reach, boots still on, silence again, until scraping began, low, deliberate. Like metal dragged slowly across wood, I bolted upright. The scraping traveled along the wall. Slow and faint, it stopped near a window, then crawled to the next wall, then around the corner. I clicked the flashlight on, chest tight, and pointed it through the windows. Across the porch, the door, the other side. But nothing moved, no shadow, no animal. Just that scrape continuing in its circle. And then 3 knocks, short, sharp. Measured, knock, 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 back door. Knuckles rattled my chest. I pinned myself in place. Flashlight shaking just enough, I waited. But nothing else came. No more knocks, no more scraping. So, I did the only thing that made sense at 3 o'clock in the morning. I dragged a chair into the kitchen, pointed the flashlight at the door, and sat frozen. Every time I closed my eyes, adrenaline yanked me awake. I think I finally passed out sometime before dawn. When light came, the windows glowed. I blinked. Moved slowly, chest heavy, head pounding. I forced myself outside. That's when I saw them. Boot prints circling the whole cabin. Not sharp, but not old either. I knew they weren't there the day before. They had been made during the night. The worst part was the pattern. They weren't random. Not someone pacing or heading straight in. No circles, spirals, overlapping loops, careful curves. Someone had walked in shapes, and there were no tire tracks anywhere. Just boot prints in the dirt spiraling. Whoever did this either knew the layout or felt their way in the darkness. Either way, it wasn't random. I didn't eat. I didn't pack neatly. I flung clothes into my bag, left the leftover chili in the pot to rot. Grabbed my bag, my keys, and went. Every half-mile down the road, I glanced back, expecting to see someone standing at the tree line. The drive off that mountain felt endless. Each bend made me feel like I wasn't going downhill. But deeper into the mountains, when my phone finally showed a signal, I called my uncle, told him I was heading home early. Didn't give him a reason, didn't need to. I never went back to that cabin. I was 24 when it happened. My parents were up in a town called Cedar Ridge, helping my Aunt Larkin recover from surgery. So I offered to stay behind and watch the house. It was just a normal thing. I'd done it plenty of times. I grew up there. The house sits tucked deep in the Appalachian foothills, past the point where cell service dies, and the gravel road bends like a question you can't answer until you get there. That kind of quiet doesn't feel calm. It doesn't hush you. It waits. Maybe that's why I spent the early evening pretending not to notice it. I set up in the living room with my usual setup, laptop perched on a makeshift stand, a pile of old magazines, a bag of chips within reach, some random videos playing, nothing serious. Just enough background noise so I wouldn't feel like the only one awake in the mountains. I'll admit I was a little restless. Maybe restless isn't even the right word. I was alert, aware in a way the city never let you be. By the time the clock edged toward midnight, I was close to shutting everything off. I told myself the worst part of the night was over, that the house and I could just coast into unremarkable darkness together. That's when I heard it. Not a crash, not a statement, just a crunch. Leaves under something heavy, something deliberate. I tried to tell myself it was a deer or a raccoon. Black bears wandered through sometimes. That wouldn't be new, but there was a tempo to it, almost like pacing, and it stayed. Every time my breath caught, I thought about muting the video. Eventually, I did. The world went quiet. Only the house spoke. Wood settling, pipes cooling, my heartbeat thudding, and then crunch. Right at the edge of the wall, just beyond the living room windows. Not loud but intimate, undeniable. I edged toward the window, breathing shallow but steady. I pulled the curtain back just enough to peek. The fabric rustled louder than it should have. The yard lay quiet under pale, empty light. Black outlines of trees stood at the edge, skeletal and bare, but nothing moved. I stared too long. Then I blinked and retreated back into the dark. Then came the creak on the porch. There's one board on the front deck, loose since I was a kid. Step on it wrong, and it groans like it's complaining. That groan echoed down to me. But I was inside. I hadn't moved. Well, I had just a twitch of my foot, and then before me this same groan from outside. My head jerked up. I held my breath. Funny how still you can go. Thinking stillness makes you safer, I didn't move again. I just stayed there. Senses stretched, mind racing. After what felt like seconds or maybe minutes, I told myself I needed water. Maybe I needed normal, so I walked slow and deliberate to the kitchen. The sink, the faucet, everything grounded me until it didn't. I grabbed a glass, the old metal handle stuck, then gave way with a scrape, and in that instant, I heard the same grind of metal from the other side of the wall. Like someone was copying me, offset by a breath, just a few heartbeats behind. I jolted. The glass slipped from my fingers and shattered. The crash wasn't deafening, but in that silence, it felt like it broke somewhere inside me, and then from outside. The same sound came back, half a beat behind, mirrored. I swallowed hard. My throat tightened. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I just stood there frozen, fingers tingling against the countertop. I killed the lights, sat down on the couch, cushion edges pressing into my legs. Keys clenched in my hand like a talisman. Every noise became a clue. Every shifting floorboard, every breath of cooling air. Even the refrigerator hum felt like it was listening now. Time fractured, minutes stretched, hours jammed themselves together. I couldn't tell anymore. And then something shifted again. The porch sighed, slow, deliberate, like a long breath in a cabin meant to breathe out only for you. Then the screen door slid open. That soft dragging squeal I knew too well. Someone moved it just enough to keep it quiet. But not silent. I felt the cold prickle crawl my spine. The rational voice argued, "It's nothing, it's the wind. It's an animal." But I knew better. Someone knew how that sound worked. Someone was on the other side of that door. I couldn't think anymore. My muscles tensed like I'd been cued. I stayed statue, still listening, body vibrating with the urge to run and the terror of waking up whatever was out there. Then the doorknob rattled. That was it. I bolted. No careful steps, no quiet. I crossed the room, shoved the back door open, and sprinted across the gravel drive. Sharp stones burned my feet, but I didn't feel them until I was halfway across. I flung myself into the truck, door slammed, keys jammed into the ignition. The engine roared to life louder than any bear. Louder than anything. I didn't look back, didn't need to. Gravel flew. Headlights tore the trees into sharp fragments. Beyond them, nothing, no figure, no animal, just the house. Still silent, gone. I didn't slow until the main road. I floored it. All the way to the gas station on the hill where service flickered back. My parents had headed into town for supplies, which they usually said would take until evening. But with the winding mountain roads, with Mom's habit of lingering in every store, and Dad talking to everyone he passed until evening, probably meant much longer. I didn't mind. I'd grown up with this. Our cabin sits deep in the Appalachian hills, right where the gravel road fades into the forest. It feels like the trees lean inward, almost closing us off, even blocking out what little cell signal we ever get. No neighbors, rare cars, silence everywhere. That kind of stillness just felt normal. That afternoon, I stretched out on the old couch with a fuzzy blanket over my legs. A book rested loosely in my hands, and my tea had gone lukewarm on the coffee table. The refrigerator hummed in the corner. A slow tick-tock from the wall clock was the only other sound. Then came a scraping noise at the back door. It was faint, like metal against wood. I paused, my heart bumping, but nothing followed. I told myself it was just a branch brushing the siding or the cabin timber settling. The place was old. It made noises, familiar noises still. I wasn't really reading anymore. My eyes moved over words without taking them in. Then it came again, a longer scrape, more certain. I dropped the book and stood. The kitchen lights were off, but pale light from outside the back door. The old brass handle was moving, rattling faintly in its frame, like someone was testing it. I crept into the kitchen, careful, and stopped at the doorway, my heart hammered. That's when I remembered the deadbolt was still unlocked from when I took out the trash earlier. My parents had always drilled into me, lock it the second you come. And I hadn't. With shaky fingers, I flicked the bolt closed. The sharp click echoed far too loud. I froze, listening. Nothing followed. Even so, unease settled heavy in my bones. I returned to the couch, sitting forward, every muscle taut, senses stretched wide. My tea was cold now. I didn't care then. A shadow cut across the porch light outside. Brief but clear. At first, I thought it was a trick of the eye. But the shape flickered again, deliberate, steady. Someone was standing at the window. No knock, no voice, just presence. I slid off the couch and crouched low behind the armrest, back against the wall. Every groan of the porch boards made me flinch. Slow, careful steps shifted across the porch. The figure stopped at the front door. I heard the knob turn once. Soft, then again, harder. It didn't open. Then came a new sound, tap, tap, tap. Like fingernails dragging across glass. Slow, intentional. My chest thudded as I crawled toward the hallway. The landline hung on its little table there. I grabbed the receiver and pressed it to my ear. Relief surged through me at the dial tone. I hadn't dared hope it still worked. I dialed my parents first. The line rang and rang. Then I tried the sheriff, punching the numbers with trembling hands. That's when I heard it, stomping above me, slow, uneven, from upstairs. The part of the cabin we barely used except for storage, or the spare bed left untouched most of the year. The sound of someone walking on that floor sent my stomach lurching. My pulse racing double time. I didn't speak. I didn't dare. I gently set the phone back down. Then I ran down the hallway into the kitchen. My fingers fumbled at the bolt, clumsy, foreign, until at last the door gave way. I shoved it open and burst. Outside, branches clawed my arms as I pushed through. Roots and rocks threatened to trip me, but I didn't stop. Not until the cabin light sank behind me, and only the forest loomed dark. I dropped into a crouch, breath ragged, hidden in the underbrush at the edge of the clearing. I looked back. The front door was open. A man stepped out, broad shoulders, shaved head, a heavy jacket zipped to his chin. Even though the night was thick with muggy air, he didn't speak. He didn't pause. His head turned slowly side to side, scanning. Then he began to move, purposeful, circling the cabin with steady steps. No wasted motion, no hesitation, just searching, like he knew exactly what he wanted. My hands clenched in the dirt and leaves. If he headed into the trees, I'd be trapped, exposed. I prayed he wouldn't. After what felt like forever, he slipped into the darkness behind the cabin. That was enough. I bolted again through the woods, slipping and stumbling until I hit the gravel road. My legs felt heavy as I threw my arms up when headlights curved around the bend. The truck slowed. The driver leaned over, eyes wide when he saw me, chest heaving, hair plastered with sweat. He didn't ask a thing. I stammered out broken words, trembling, but he only nodded and swung the door open. I climbed in. He turned the truck around and sped down the road toward the sheriff's office. When we pulled into the lot, I called my parents again. This time, they answered. They were already panicked, already on their way. Deputies moved fast. Less than an hour later, back at the cabin with my parents close behind, the sheriff and his men searched the place. An upstairs window frame was splintered. The latch had been forced. Whoever it was had already gotten in while I sat downstairs thinking I was alone. That creaking above me, those footsteps on the floor no one used. That sound never left me. That was it. I never spent another night there alone again. I was 29 when it happened, staying out at my Uncle Ray's cabin somewhere deep in the hill country near a tiny place they call Winlow. He'd gone into the hospital for surgery, nothing deadly, just enough to sideline him for a few days, and asked me to keep an eye on things. I was happy to help, didn't think twice, more time off work, some quiet. What could go wrong? I'd been there before, but this would be my longest stint solo. Once you pass that old service station, you lose cell reception. No one's close enough to hear you shout. The nearest little town sits about 40 minutes away. If the dirt road isn't blowing dust in your face like a sandstorm, and it often is, the cabin is stubbornly simple. 2 tiny bedrooms, a front room with floors that sigh under weight, and a kitchen that always smells faintly of wood smoke and pine. Like it remembers 1,000 breakfasts but still can't let go of the stove. Ray built it decades ago. He always said it was honest, built with sweat, nails, and enough patience to make him swear at every crooked board. The thing creaks like it's whispering jokes at 2 a.m. I pulled in mid-afternoon, carried in my duffel bag, feeling the kind of ease only solitude in familiar places gives. I tossed my bag on the spare bed in the smaller bedroom, shrugged off my jacket, even though there was enough chill in the air to make you think twice. Got myself settled, moved a stack of yellowed postcards onto the nightstand, cracked a window. A hair to let in the smell of wet leaves, thought, sure, this will be a pretty chill few days. The first night, pretty chill. I managed to burn the eggs on the wood stove, something I'm unreasonably proud of since I can't ever seem to do that. At home, and I remembered how still it is in places like that. The forest hums, but not loudly, like a bunch of occupants that all decided to whisper. Not shout, but around midnight I heard it. A scrape, pretty light, came from the porch railing. Not enough to threaten. More like claws dragging across old pine. Didn't stick around long. Just a one-off, then another slow, deliberate scrape. I told myself it was raccoons. Raccoons are basically the neighborhood cats of the wilderness, persistent, curious, a little grubby, so I grabbed the flashlight, cracked open the door, and pointed the beam out onto the porch, empty. Nothing but my own breath in the dark, leaning in. It was silent enough to think the forest was watching me. Still, I double-checked the lock, shut the door, went back to that book, trying to tell myself that when you're all alone, the imagination fills in big blanks. And the forest doesn't care. The next morning, I woke to find the front door unlocked. I stood there barefoot, reading light on my face, thinking, did I really forget to lock it? But no, I lock it. I always double-check the deadbolt. I wouldn't have left it like that. I know locks can be stubborn. Sometimes the grooves in the bolt catch, but this was different. It was clean, right back where it belonged, except now it was unlocked from the inside. I drank coffee, thinking through that, then stepped out onto the porch to clear my head. Rocks crunched under my feet. Breath rose in little clouds. Mornings are still cold there in early October, and I saw footprints in the mud by the steps. Bare footprints, broad and flat, pressed deep, like whoever left them stood there for a moment, maybe longer, didn't match my feet. Not in size, not in spacing, definitely their own thing. My first wave of creep or maybe dread hit there, but I didn't call anyone, no signal, and even if I tried, what would I say? Hi. Somebody might have walked barefoot by the cabin porch. People would nod, think I was getting weird, and I'd feel silly. Better to tuck it away by night 3. Stuff started messing with my head a bit more, not on purpose, just off small things. I left the glass clean, empty on the kitchen counter before bed. In the morning, I found it on the floor by the back door. No one else was there. The latch on the back screen door, a simple hook I always engaged, was undone, and the chairs at the table just slightly shifted. One at a sharper angle, like someone stood and moved away. but no evidence of legs. Another turned. So its back pointed at the window like it was gazing out. None of that reads low-key when you spend your nights listening to boards talk back to your heels. I lay awake that night, eyes wide, trying not to jump at every pop. You learn how every old house speaks in its own language. The fridge hums, pipes tinkle, floorboards articulate every nuance of weight. Just after 3, I felt it. Mattress edge depressed. I froze, thought maybe I dozed and shifted. But this was too deliberate. The edge of the mattress sunk as though someone pressed down. I didn't move a muscle. It stayed for seconds that stretched into lifetimes. Then eased away, the weight lifted. I snapped the lamp on, nothing. Shadows lay still. I drove myself through every dusty corner, closets, under the beds, the crawl space. Even pounded on walls to check for hidden spots, but empty, except the mattress. It was still warm. That indentation lingered on the sheet as if it remembered someone sinking into it. I packed halfway right then, dithered over socks and underwear, trying to rationalize staying one more night just to prove I wasn't some frightened kid. But morning can't come soon enough when you feel tiny things lining up against your confidence. Before dawn, I got up again, restless, shaking off chills, trying to roast coffee beans dry over that little stove. I just needed something normal to do, except the cabin had one last thing in mind. I heard the old floor groan noise, a slow, deliberate creak from the front room, the rocking chair, that chair Ray always parked by the window like it's got its own rhythms. It was rocking forward and back, no wind, no hand, even the kind that look easy to push rock only if you nudge them. And on the seat, a folded flannel shirt I never unpacked. Not orange, not olive green, a dull soft crimson with a faint pattern. Like faded wood grain. It was Ray's style at least as much as a cloud is steel. Didn't touch it, didn't study the fabric or patterns, didn't want to know. I yanked my keys, threw my bag in the car half zipped, contents jangling, slammed the door behind me, and drove. That road seemed to stretch forever, each bump rattling the blood in my head. I drove without looking back once. My parents had this plan. They were heading off for a week-long trip out of state, so I got the house to myself. It was the place I grew up in, tucked deep in the Appalachian hills, remote, miles away from anything you'd call town. The driveway was a long strip of gravel winding through dense woods before spilling onto a dusty dirt road. Most people gave me a strange look when they heard where I lived. They'd say, "That's pretty far." But to me, it was just familiar. The quiet, the towering trees, the fact that nobody was around for miles, that was home. The first 2 days were exactly what I wanted. Peaceful, low-key. I worked remotely during the day, rummaged through the fridge for leftovers, plopped down on the couch to watch movies late into the night. Who doesn't love a few nights of solitude and takeout? Even the silence had comfort. I didn't mind the hum of the fridge, the click of my laptop, the rustle of leaves outside the window. It felt good to be alone. Like the whole world had settled just for me. Then came the second night. I was halfway through some old sci-fi flick, not even a great one, when I muted the volume to grab a drink. Silence fell. That's when I heard it, the distinct crunch of gravel. Just 1, maybe 2 steps, as if someone had shifted their footing way out in the driveway. I froze, glass in hand, waiting a beat, then another. I set the drink down, shuffled to the blinds, and pulled them back, squinted into the porch light. Nothing. The driveway was empty. I told myself it was probably a raccoon, or maybe a deer. Out here, wildlife wanders close, closer than most folks realize. I shrugged it off, but something in my chest stayed unsettled. Night 3 around 11 o'clock. I turned off the lights, curled up on the couch with a bowl of noodles. Movie paused on the screen. That's when I heard it again. Louder this time, heavier, the crunch of gravel, definitely deliberate. Like boots pressing into stone, I held my breath, leaned toward the window, flicked on the small porch light, the one that glowed a dim yellow again. Nothing, no car, no figure. Just an empty stage. But the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It felt heavy, expectant, like whatever was out there was waiting for me to notice. I shut the blinds, told myself again, maybe it's a deer. But deer don't walk like that. By the fourth night, I was convinced I'd imagined it, around 11. I was upstairs brushing my teeth when I heard it. The rattle of the front door handle, not a faint jiggle, not a spring bouncing back, but metal twisting once, twice. I froze, toothpaste foaming in my mouth, dripping onto the sink. No knock, no voice, just that rattle. I stared at the deadbolt gleaming in place, held my breath until my chest ached. Finally, I spit, swallowed, and forced myself down the hall. The door was still locked, but the stillness felt loaded. Morning came with stiff light. I'd almost forgotten until I stepped outside to toss a can in the recycling. That's when I saw it. The welcome mat, always perfectly even against the porch step, was crooked, tilted at an odd angle, like someone had stood on it, pivoted, and walked away. I know I hadn't touched it. That night, I left no shadows. Every light in the house was on. Kitchen, hallway, stairwell, even the basement lamp. Midnight came. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, mind racing. Then came the crunching again, not just a few steps. Footsteps, slow and weighty. They traveled down the driveway, circling the house from gravel to siding, from dirt to the porch. And then, right beneath my bedroom window, I lay frozen, too afraid to move. The footsteps retraced, slow exit. By morning, I felt hollow. I pulled on boots and stepped outside. Behind the porch where the soil was damp, I saw them. Footprints, clear, deep impressions, not work boots, not hiking boots, something else. The tracks led a few paces into the woods, then stopped. No continuation. It was as if someone had stepped forward and vanished. That night, I dragged the heavy chair to the front door, wedged it under the knob like a lock. I sat at the table, knife within reach, eyes on the door. Hours stretched, coffee went cold. Around 3 a.m., the crickets outside fell silent, then loud enough to rattle my bones. Something slammed upstairs. I scrambled, knife in hand, heart in my throat. I knew I'd left every door open. I checked, but now one had slammed shut. The guest room. I crept up the stairs, palms slick against the wall. The door stood closed. I pressed it open. The room was empty. No intruder, no shadow. But the bedspread was pulled back, sheets tucked, with perfect corners, neat, surgical. That bed hadn't been touched in months. I snapped, grabbed my keys, kicked the chair aside, ran for the car. Headlights lit the trees as I tore out of the driveway. I didn't stop until I reached Elmont 20 minutes away. I sat in an empty parking lot until dawn.